So keep these stupid American trucks out of Europe, by not just bikes.
SUVs and pickup trucks are dangerous, and there is irrefutable evidence of this. Their extreme weight and stiff frames makes them dangerous to other vehicles in a crash, which has turned road safety into an arms race that favors those who can afford the biggest and heaviest vehicle. And their blunt vertical front ends designed entirely for aesthetics are more dangerous to pedestrians. When a person is hit by a car, they're likely to land on the hood, which would not be particularly enjoyable. But a person hit by one of these trucks is much more likely to be knocked back and impact the ground or be run over by the truck.
It is basically the equivalent of being inside like a small truck, yeah. When I used to work at a place where we cut trees and stuff like that, a few times I had to drive the, how would you call it, like it's a minivan, basically, like a big truck minivan, I guess. But obviously, like the seat is like, I don't know, like the seat is like 1.5 meters above the ground compared to a car, right? It's a lot more. And driving that a few times, yeah, you realize that you don't really see too much in front of you. Like, you have a couple meters in front of you where you don't really see. So you see kind of like further ahead, and you have to anticipate a lot more while driving. So imagine like a kid, right, in front of you. Let's say at a pedestrian crossing, you would not see them being in such a big ass truck. I mean, I understand for workers it makes sense, but like for regular people, even though the US is massive and you have the space for it, I don't feel like you need this kind of truck. I don't understand the logic of it.
Which is why research has found that people are 44% more likely to die when hit by an SUV or light truck than they are if hit by a car. For children, that number was found to be 82% higher. And for children under 10, it's 130%. And pickup trucks are even worse. This 2023 Belgian study found that a pedestrian or cyclist hit by a pickup truck had an almost 200% higher risk of fatal injury than if hit by a car. What's worse is that light trucks are also more likely to crash in the first place. Due to their heavy weight and high center of gravity, SUVs have worse handling than a typical car, and they have longer braking distances too.
So then what's the reason? I mean, I don't want to say it's because people want to look cool, right? I'm sure that's part of it. Is it the space? Like you can transport a lot more stuff in that?
And their high center of gravity also means that they are much more likely to roll over, even at low speeds. Rollover deaths in light trucks were a major problem in the early 2000s, and in response, automobile manufacturers started making their vehicles stronger to avoid crushing the occupants in case of a rollover. A major side effect of this, however, is that the pillars of the vehicle, such as this A-pillar, have become much larger, which reduces visibility. And visibility was already terrible on these trucks because, due to their high height and excessively large hoods, they have insanely huge front blind spots. This NBC News investigation showed that 9 children can sit in front of a typical American SUV and be completely invisible.
That's what I was talking about. Like, your view is basically projected a few meters ahead. It makes sense. And there's no way that's a good thing, obviously.
Visible to the driver, which is why there's been a steep increase in what are known as front-over and back-over accidents. Someone hit or run over by a truck moving at slow speeds simply because the driver could not see them. And it's often a parent running over their own child in their driveway. Understandably, these kind of vehicles can't pass EU safety regulations, which is why they're illegal in Europe, and thankfully they can't be sold here. Or at least, they're not supposed to be. Due to a regulation loophole, thousands of these dangerous American trucks are being imported into the European Union each year, bypassing safety and emissions standards and making our roads less safe.
My thoughts with one of those is that they're literally too big. I mean, I've lived mostly in like small villages and small towns, right? But a lot of them tend to be very narrow, right? Like, it's not a meme. The US is massive, the streets are massive, the roads are massive, so it accommodates. But like, looking at this image, for example, like a lot of streets in France, especially in small village, are literally the sidewalk, right? Like, you barely have a meter on each side when you're driving down that street sometime. So like with this kind of truck, I don't know. I don't feel like it's made for that.
And even as road safety advocates and city councils across Europe are trying to get the EU to plug these loopholes, Recent trade talks with the U.S. threaten to nullify vehicle safety regulations completely, which would open the floodgates to these stupid American trucks in Europe. In October, 75 European organizations, including this...
At the same time, I'm thinking, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think about this, like, my first thought, you know, is like, maybe it's the French blood. I don't like the government telling me what car to buy. My first thought is that, even though this one is much more deadly. But that's stupid, I know. Then I'm thinking, you know, like, if we want to make the road safer, there's a lot more to do, right? I mean, bikes, for example, aren't bikes like so much more dangerous for the people riding them, not for other people? So I guess maybe that's the argument, right? Like, you're only endangering yourself, so whatever. No, I guess that makes sense. I mean, we should have like the safest possible cars on the road for pedestrians and cyclists and all that. No, that makes sense. I don't know where I was going with this. It was literally just my stupid instinct of like, you know, not liking the government telling me what to do. It just came up.
The city of Amsterdam, where I live, signed a joint letter to the EU Parliament entitled, "The intention to accept lower U.S. vehicle standards risks increasing deaths and pollution on EU roads."
Pollution for sure.
Their concern is justified. In the EU, road deaths have decreased by 36% since 2010. But in the U.S., road deaths have increased by 30% during the same time period.
That's insane.
What's worse is that pedestrian deaths in the U.S. have increased by 80% since 2010, and they are now at the highest level they've been since the 1980s.
Okay, well, that seems like a pretty shut and closed case.
Meanwhile, EU pedestrian deaths have dropped 37% since 2010. There are several cities in the EU that have achieved huge reductions in vehicle fatalities. For example, Helsinki, which had 0 road deaths over the past 12 months. They achieved this through many of the things I talk about on this channel, such as safer street design, more automated enforcement systems, and most importantly, lower speed limits. Which is why many municipalities, including Amsterdam, have implemented a city-wide default speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour. But even outside of these progressive cities, there has also been a general steady reduction in road deaths across the entire EU over the past 15 years. And the main contributor to that is improved safety regulations for motor vehicles. This letter to the EU Parliament comes in a response to the recent trade talks underway between the United States and the European Union. As part of a joint statement published in August, the EU said that,
"With respect to automobiles, the United States and the European Union intend to accept and provide mutual recognition to each other's standards."
Mutual recognition is a...
But then what's the point to have the standard in your own country and then just recognizing the other country's standard, which is totally not the same and doesn't match your own? What's the point to even having a standard then?
Fundamental principle of EU policy. It is how a product certified in one jurisdiction can be sold in all other jurisdictions throughout the EU, and it's a necessary component of the EU common market. For example, the Good Manufacturing Practice, or GMP legislation, means that a drug manufacturer in the US only needs to be inspected by the US Food and Drug Administration, and then that drug can be sold in the EU without recertification.
Okay.
This makes sense as it's an effective way to streamline regulations, and it works very well, provided that all jurisdictions involved have a similar certification process for the product that is being mutually recognized. But that is not the case for motor vehicles. EU safety standards for automobiles are significantly higher than they are in the US, both in terms of what is tested, but also who does the testing. U.S. automotive safety testing focuses primarily on occupant safety in typical crash scenarios. One of the only tests that is more strict in the U.S. than in Europe is rollover safety tests, due to the entirely manufactured problem of excessive rollover crashes as American manufacturers started promoting light trucks in the 90s. But if these stupid American trucks weren't so top-heavy and regular-heavy in the first place, these tests wouldn't be so important, and engineering resources could go into other safety features. As a result of these testing differences, EU cars are safer than US cars. A 2015 report found that a typical EU car on US roads would have about a 33% lower risk of serious injury than a typical US model, And this doesn't take into account recent safety improvements in Euro NCAP safety standards. Most notably in 2020 when they introduced the Mobile Progressive Deformable Barrier Test for front-end crashes. It took me a couple of takes to get that test name right, but basically, instead of crashing a car against a solid wall, this test uses a crash between the vehicle and a moving trolley to replicate the other car involved in the crash. An important aspect of this test is how the vehicle manages to share the crash energy. In short, if a vehicle is found to be more dangerous to other vehicles, it will lose points off of its safety rating, which makes sense. Vehicles shouldn't be able to pass safety tests by making the roads more dangerous for everyone else.
Well, yeah.
This is a very common theme when comparing EU to US vehicle safety tests. US testing is myopically focused on the vehicle and its occupants, while Europe tests not just the vehicle, but also how it interacts with other road users. Which is why the Euro NCAP safety rating has 4 categories, one of them being focused entirely on vulnerable road users. Part of this testing involves pedestrian impacts, and vehicles are scored on how they impact different parts of a person's body. These kind of tests have been around for a long time, which is why it's common for cars in Europe to have hoods with explosive bolts that pop up on impact, or even pedestrian airbags to protect people hit by cars.
I've never heard of that.
Notice how on these Tesla cars the hood has popped up before the dummy head hits the car. They don't do this on their American models because nobody is making them do it. The NHTSA has a proposal for future pedestrian safety tests, but today vehicles sold in the US are not required to pass any kind of pedestrian
But
safety.
again, I'm just confused why this is even a thing. I understand that in the US, this kind of thing will probably not change, it's the way it is, but why is this even a debate that it would be okay to bring this kind of vehicle here? Like, for decades, all this money, time, and laws have been made to make safer cars in Europe. So why would we suddenly be like, it's fine to bring the US one, which don't meet any of the standards? I mean, trade, money, but come on. Doesn't that just nullify all the work done for like all this time? Hello, Pam. What's up?
Tests at all, which is why their vehicles have been allowed to become so ridiculously dangerous to anybody outside of a car. But all of that aside, even if a crash test in the US is reasonably equivalent to a test in the EU, there's still a massive fundamental difference. In the EU, automobile manufacturers are required to pass a type approval process by independent public authorities to certify a specific vehicle model before it can be released to market. While in the US, all crashworthiness and compliance tests are self-certified by the car manufacturer.
Self-certified.
The NHTSA does some spot checks, but the vast majority of motor vehicles enter the US market with a trust me bro approach to safety. And if
I don't even know what to say, except I shouldn't be surprised, I guess. That is insane. I mean, I guess it just showcases how much like the US laws don't care about, don't care about it because they're literally telling the company to like, I mean, it's kind of like the meme of like, the government investigated itself and found no wrongdoing. It's basically that, right? The car manufacturer determined that their car are very safe. So don't ask any question, they are very safe.
you don't think automobile manufacturers are doing everything they can to cut corners on those self-certification tests?
Tesla.
I have a Ford Pinto to sell you.
I mean, what everybody is shitting on, like, the Cybertruck, there's still, like, a lot of Tesla cars out there. Like, a really good amount. The more, like, normal-looking one, at least.
Incidentally, the Pinto scandal was likely the inspiration for the narrator's job in Fight Club.
Take the number of vehicles in the field, A, multiply it by the probable rate of failure, B, then multiply the result by the average out-of-court settlement, C. A times B times C equals X. If X is less than the cost of a recall, we don't do one.
I also think that the already shocking pedestrian fatality statistics out of the U.S. are understating the dangers, because the U.S. has managed to significantly reduce their pedestrian fatalities by just having fewer pedestrians. Can't have pedestrian deaths if there's no pedestrians. Checkmate, Europe. Outside of a small number of urban cores, the number of people who walk in American cities is vanishingly small. And this is hiding how
I was watching another video about that, yeah. It's by a guy who used to live in the US and moved to England, I forget his name, but he was talking about, you know, he was basically like, he went back to the town he grew up in, and he was showing us like, there's barely like any road, roadwalk, and you know, he was showing like the route he had to go to school, and some of it basically, you know, was like having to walk literally on the road because there was no sidewalk, and you know, there was no crossing and stuff like that. And I think it's just part of like the US being like gigantic. So like most cities are built in a way where like, you know, you have like 20 kilometers between like Walmart and your house or something. So like, even if you have a bike, you might just take a car, right? I get it. It's just the design of the US being so massive, you know, they have like infinite land. But also, yeah, it's kind of crazy how little people seem to work on the US because it is like a massively low percentage.
bad the situation has become. But people actually walk in Europe. So if these trucks become common here, it will be a bloodbath, and for no good reason. So you might be wondering who benefits from this trade deal and why is the EU considering it at all? Well, first are the American motor vehicle companies who would love to sell their high-margin vehicles in Europe. The only reason why these vehicles became popular in the US in the first place is because automobile manufacturers realized they could bypass regulations by selling work vehicles as consumer vehicles. Then they funneled those profits into marketing to drive demand for these impractical vehicles. Americans didn't love trucks naturally, they were advertised into it. If you want to learn more, the history of this is well documented in the book High and Mighty, written by a Detroit automobile journalist who was writing about the car industry when all of this happened. American automakers would love to do the same thing in Europe, if only they could eliminate those pesky safety regulations.
Of course.
But the real push for this trade deal comes from within the EU itself, mostly from German automobile manufacturers. In April, the US government applied an arbitrary 25% tariff to all cars imported from the European Union, which affected any European automobile manufacturer who relied heavily on the US market. In a recent press release, Volkswagen said that US tariffs would cost the company up to 5 billion euros this year, and that tariffs have reduced their year-over-year profit by 58%. So they are desperate to do literally anything they can to have the...
Which means it works, right? I mean, the stupid tariff that Trump put on is literally making the German company being like, I guess we have no choice but to get US cars into Europe. So I guess his bullshit is working, and that's kind of sad.
Those tariffs reduced, even if it means risking the lives of millions of Europeans. Plus, I'm sure they are salivating at the idea of importing their high-margin foreign brands into the EU while bypassing safety and emissions regulations. As part of these negotiations, the EU...
Again, I still can't help but feel like most people wouldn't buy this anyway, right? I mean, again, I haven't lived in like 10,000 cities, and you know, I've only lived in France. I don't know all of Europe, but I feel like this kind of thing is just not, like, this isn't the kind of car that you want to drive in the very small village town, and most of Europe is like small village town like this. And I mean, I feel like even if you think it looks cool, which I guess it kind of looks cool, I don't know, again, like, I can't imagine trying to maneuver in like those very small roads where you have like just a meter on the side of your door, while, you know, you're like so high into your seat, your hood is so long that you can't even see like 5 meters in front of you. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me.
Safety and emissions regulations. As part of these negotiations, the EU was able to get the Trump administration to reduce the tariff rate from 25% to 15%, at least for now. Of course, I don't know why anybody would trust any trade deals out of the US these days. The other week, Trump arbitrarily increased tariffs on all products from Canada by 10%, simply because the Ontario government aired a commercial on right-wing news channels that was literally just a segment of a Ronald Reagan speech about tariffs.
It is a meme.
It's not even supposed to be legal for a U.S. president to arbitrarily impose tariffs like this, but it's very clear that the American government is no longer following their own laws anyway, so none of that matters anymore. So remind me again why Europe should be willing to cripple our vehicle safety regulations for a country which has proven to be lawless, arbitrary, and vindictive?
Money, obviously, as they explain. Money. What else? Money.
And it's not like pickup trucks are fundamentally illegal in Europe or something. They just need to pass EU safety testing, which is completely reasonable. If you think that signing a deal like this with the US would be disastrous for Europe, I'll put a link to a site where you can find and contact your member of European Parliament, as well as links to some of the advocacy groups who are fighting this proposed trade deal. And if you'd like to learn more about American light trucks, I have a previous video about how they became popular and the damage they're causing in North America. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support...
Interesting. I mean, again, like, if it's gonna make a lot of money, they're definitely going to do it. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense because, again, it's literally like undoing the work of Europe for like decades of making all the safety ratings and feature and testing. You know, that seems like not worth it. I don't know. I'm no expert, you know. I'm no expert. Interesting though. Interesting. Good video. Glad we watched it. Pickup gives people like a power trip. I'm seeing this as an SUV driver. I mean, it is kind of the meme, right? Like, the bigger the car, the more like it's to make up for a small dick. That's kind of the meme, right? So if you see someone driving like an Hummer or something, you know, you're instantly seeing that, you know, it's some like 50-year-old bald guy with like, you know, steroid muscles coming out and being super angry at you for like passing him or something. It is kind of the meme. And I don't think it's always true, right? Like some people, they have like big cars or big truck because, I don't know, they're often transporting stuff or something. But I think in the US, like sometimes it's literally like your soccer mom, right? That has this massive pickup truck for no reason. Like all she does is like pick up the kids and she gets the groceries, but like they fit on the back and that's it. You don't need something that massive. I don't know. But then as he was talking about, maybe it's also like because everybody else is driving big stuff, you don't want to be the one person with a small car because if you get hit by like a big truck, you're fucked. So it's like everybody is getting something bigger to not get killed, and then it just keeps going, right? Everybody is trying to go bigger to like survive a crash. It seems like an endlessly self-perpetuating problem, I guess. LAM TLX pickup that can reach 700 horsepower. Nope. The LAM TLX. Damn. Okay. Let's see a video real quick. Launch control. I cannot imagine that this thing is easy to steal. I mean, just do this and you're flipping. That's powerful. Okay. That's powerful. Alright, so here's a link. Again, really good video. I enjoyed it. Okay.